we have so many people joining us, and I want to take some time to say hello. We have Alil, Desmilia, Ira, Johan, and we have Dr. Fogg. Welcome.
Bam, back. I'm back on a different browser. I'm not going to name the browser name.
Yeah, no, but you look great, and I could hear you, so that's fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just talking a little bit about untangling and some things that I worked on during the pandemic, including, I didn't have a commute anymore, so I would end up sort of being in bed longer in the morning, but then I ended up sort of slowly replacing that time with something else. So that way I had a reason to get up. So I was able to sort of disrupt that a little bit.
And Andrew, can I comment on how that works? And what you did was exactly right. And when you are discouraged, or when you are anxious, or when you are stressed out, and who isn't these days, the way that you can combat that, the way you give yourself hope, is by making tiny changes and helping yourself feel successful for those changes. And in my research, what I find is that the size of the change, the size of the success, doesn't seem to matter very much to our brains. So even you pouring a glass of water and taking a sip and then feeling good about doing that can have just an oversized effect on how you think about yourself and your optimism and your confidence. So the secret here, or the thing that I find so amazing, is even by making tiny changes and feeling successful, it can have a really big impact on our confidence, our motivation moving forward. It reduces fear, it reduces anxiety. And so you don't have to make huge changes to build momentum and get going. Focus on the tiniest things that you want to change, that you want to bring into your life.
Yeah. And why, why, when you talk about tiny habits and taking these baby steps toward changing your routine and what you're doing, why don't those big leaps work? Why is it sort of those incremental steps? Because I know there's a lot of people, they're impatient. Why does it take a long time to make to sort of get through that threshold? So why don't the big changes work? And you have your behavioral model there.
I'm going to show a visual aid. And in fact, I'll be even goofier. I'm going to bring in a stuffed animal to do this. So I didn't think I was going to do this, but I'm always prepared. So this is how behavior works. Human behavior works in this way. If you're above the action line when prompted, you'll do the behavior. Okay, if you're below the action line with low motivation, hard to do, you're not going to do the behavior when prompted. So if you pick something hard to do, you're right here. So a monkey picks a hard habit. In order to do the habit, so it's hard to do, monkey's motivation has to be high. As soon as monkey's motivation sags, he can no longer do the hard behavior. Now, if it's really easy to do, monkey can be high or low on the motivation axis, and he still does the habit. Where if it's hard, he has to keep, or she has to keep. I haven't figured out the gender of monkey yet. Monkey needs to keep motivation high. And as human beings, I guess monkeys as well, we can't always keep our motivation high. Our motivation shifts around over time. And that's not a flaw. That's human nature. In fact, it's probably a good thing. If our motivation was high for everything all the time, that would be kind of a really difficult way to live. So our motivation goes up and down over time. And it was looking, Andrew, at my own behavior model. It was looking at this very graphic, not this poster, but this very graphic of my own model. And I was like, oh my gosh, if it's hard to do, that means you have to sustain motivation. And we can't do that as human beings. It's very, very hard to do. So if you make it super easy and tiny, then you don't have to worry about motivation very much.
Yeah, and I think everyone could see this actually in action in normal times when gyms are open and stuff around sort of the new year, because, on January 2nd or January 3rd, the gyms are packed with people because even though they had to get up, they had to go to the gym maybe in the morning, the motivation for them is very high. They set a new goal. But then as the week goes on, people end up sort of breaking away, and I assume that's because their motivation eventually falls, and it still remains hard to go, but the motivation depletes too quickly.
Can I show you, Andrew, exactly what you described on the model here? So it's the new year. Your motivation is up here. High levels of motivation. That means you can do hard things. Okay, so this one. Now, as your motivation sags, look what happens. You're no longer able to do the hard things. And as it gets lower and lower, all you can do are the easy to do things. So as your motivation goes up and down, watch this green line. As your motivation sags, you can no longer do the hard things. If you could magically keep your motivation high, then you could do hard things. But that's not how we are. That's not human nature. We can't do that. So Tiny Habits and my work really faces the reality of who we are as human beings and what happens with our motivation. And we're designing around the problematic nature of motivation. So rather than beating ourselves up or thinking, how do I magically get more motivated? Instead, we're designing around that, and we're making things super easy, and we're designing it into our routine rather than forcing it in and using willpower.
Yes, and we're hearing from our members that they love the graph, and they could obviously find it in your book throughout, and then obviously on your website, which my producer is dropping into the comments. And we have a member here, Brian, is asking basically about habit stacking and sort of how you introduce a habit into your day, because obviously, it has to go somewhere. So how do you do it to improve the odds of success?
Yeah, terrific. So it was in 2010 that getting out of the shower, I got the insight that you can put a habit after something you already do. And I called it anchoring. So I call it anchoring. Other people have taken that concept and they call it stacking or piggybacking. But let's be clear, it's about, figuring out where does this fit naturally in your routine. And so if you have a behavior you want to do, like let's say you're writing a novel, well, scale it back to be super tiny. Maybe you write one sentence because your motivation may not be very high, but then figure out where does that fit? What do you anchor it to? And I called it anchoring because you're taking that new habit of writing one sentence or one paragraph, and you're attaching it to something very firm in your life, some routine you already do. And that means you don't have to have alarms or Post-it notes or other types of reminders. You're using your existing routine to remind you. Now, I've created a new tool to make this really, really easy to do. And Andrew, I didn't intend to talk about this, but it's a good answer to the question. If there's a way to pick the tiny habit and then find the right anchor for it, and I call it Recipe Maker. So if you go to tinyhabits.com/recipes, and it works best on mobile phones and tablets, you can do it on a desktop, but go to tinyhabits.com/recipes. You can go through the categories, pick the new habits you want, and then it's kind of like swiping. You swipe left and right. Then you can find where does this new habit fit in your life. And I've been running sessions on Clubhouse, and people can do this reliably within just a couple of minutes. And on Clubhouse, I'll bring people to the stage and we'll talk about it. And then I'll run the whole session again in 5 minutes. So it's a really, really fast way to design new habits into your life using the Tiny Habits method of anchoring, which is attaching it to a behavior or a routine that you already do reliably.
Yeah, no, and Clubhouse is a new app that is audio only, and for anyone out there that's job searching, there's a lot of job search coaches on there too. So be sure to find Dr. Fogg and check it out, and especially that tool. And we have a question here from Johan, and basically he wants to know how to avoid distractions. And I think that's something that a lot of people deal with now because their routines have been mixed up a little bit. Day to day might look different. So it does sort of incorporating that into existing routines. Is that the secret, or how do you avoid those distractions?
Yeah. Andrew, that's a really important question, but Eduardo just posted a comment in the chat that I want to address, and then we'll talk about distractions. Yep. In showing the behavior model, what you're if somebody is anywhere above the action line when prompted, they do the behavior. So this is the action zone. It's not the line, it's being above the line. So even if a behavior is really easy to do, your motivation might be super high for that behavior. It can be high or low. So you have this whole region where a super easy behavior can happen when prompted. Whereas if it's hard to do, you only have this tiny region here. And then when your motivation sags, you don't do it. So we're not really talking about what's on the line. We're talking about the action happens above the line, and below the line, it won't happen. So I just want to clarify that to Eduardo and others. Thank you for the comment. I don't think I explained that clearly enough. Andrew, to your comment of distraction, oh my gosh, there are many ways to design around distraction, but what you're doing, and I'll use this here, what you're doing is removing the prompt, removing ability, or removing motivation. So let's say the distraction is you're getting on Clubhouse too much or anything else on your phone. Well, can you remove the prompt? Yeah, there's ways to turn down the prompts or stop the prompts from Clubhouse or any other app. Okay, next. If that doesn't work, then you say, wow, can I make it harder to do to launch this app? And yes, you can. You can make it really hard to do by taking the app off your phone. Okay, that's going to reduce the Clubhouse or whatever distraction you're facing. You can make the password very hard to enter. You can change the password, so you have to think hard about it. And then if that doesn't work, then you're in a motivation situation. But in behavior design in my work, you approach it systematically. You don't take a guess. If you want to stop a behavior, you first say, can I remove the prompt for this behavior? And if you can remove the prompt, you're done, right? If you turn off all notifications, then you're less likely to use that app. If that doesn't do the job enough, then you go to ability and you say, can I make this harder to do? And you only mess around with motivation for stopping a behavior if the other two steps did not work. Okay, let me give another quick example that doesn't have to do with distraction, but it has to do with stopping. At restaurants, I like eating bread and chips, or at least I used to, but I decided they weren't on my game plan. And so instead of allowing the bread or the nachos to land on the table, the tiny habit approach would be, after I see the server coming to the table with the bread, I will say, no bread, please. So by saying no bread, please, that means the bread wouldn't be sitting there prompting me, and it would be hard to eat bread. I'd have to go to somebody else's table, okay? So what you want to do is take action to design your environment so the good behaviors are easy to do, and the bad behaviors, or the behaviors you don't want, I don't want to call them bad behaviors, behaviors that are not on your game plan, whether it's using an app or eating a certain kind of food, that you make those hard or impossible to do. So don't think about, the issue of distraction as a character flaw. Think of it as a design challenge. How do you redesign your environment so you're not being prompted to do things that will distract you, that it's not easy to do things that distract you? And start there, and don't beat yourself up, and don't think, oh, I'm a bad person or whatever. It's a design challenge and opportunity. It's not about your character or your willpower. It's how do you design it into your life or out of your life?
Yeah, and I think, a good way to think about that too is probably, when we see advertising, when we see things in supermarkets, like all those are designed to make you want to buy things. And they use this model basically to say, hey, listen, we can put up this big sign, we can put a sale on, and we can make them go and grab for that bottle of detergent or something like that, because they're playing with the prompt, the motivation, things like that.
Well, and can I give what the two general principles are? For better and for worse. There are two overriding principles that lead to lasting change, that lead to engagement. And I call these maxims. And I think I have posters for them right here. Here we go. Boom. help people do what they already want to do. And if you're changing your own life, modify it to help myself do what I already want to do. That's what every winning product or service has done. I mean, if we take Clubhouse as a very current example, I was on Clubhouse this morning and people were talking about how addicted they were to it, how it's become part of their life. Clubhouse, for some people, does a very good job of helping them do what they already want to do. Next, maxim number 2 is help people feel successful. So if you're designing for your own life and habits, help yourself feel successful. But every product or service that has engaged you, that has become part of your life, does those 2 things. Every habit that you've acquired, good or bad, all habits form in the same way. They helped you do what you already wanted to do at some level, and they helped you feel successful. So as you look at your own habits, other people's habits, products and services that have gone big, products and services that are taking off like Clubhouse, those are the 2 things that they're doing, helping people feel successful and helping people do what they already want to do.
And yeah, and I think, it's one of those things where, it's really great to sit down and think about your behaviors and see how all of this applies to those behaviors, because like you talk about in your book, you can do that. And you can end up sort of looking at your day and sort of playing with it a bit. And before we go, I want to take a question from Frederick, who wants to know, what are ways to recover from a super negative or catastrophic event that causes really big disruptions? Because I've experienced this where, I got really sick one time and basically my whole routine went out the window and I just never got back on track to what I was doing. And, Frederick said, he lost his wife and lost his job. So, he's having a very difficult time to get going again. So how do you take those tiny steps to sort of get back to some sort of routine?
When people are in tough situations, you can learn. I mean, in the book, I talk about how to do this. I'm just going to give you and others 3 very specific suggestions. Now, I don't do this in the book. In the book, I teach you how to create any habit that you want, but I want to get right to helping you immediately. Number 1, I would suggest a habit that goes like this. After your feet touch the floor in the morning, as you get out of bed, say, "It's going to be a great day." You say those 7 words. I know it sounds woo-woo, but it works, people. Just try it. And even if you don't believe it, I mean, I've been doing this for 8-9 years now. On the days, even if you don't believe it, just say, "It's going to be a great day somehow." Okay, you open the possibility that it's going to be a great day. Some people like to say, "I'm going to make it a great day." Even if you're feeling down, as you're getting out of bed, say, "I'm going to make it a great day somehow." And watch how often it will actually be a much better day than it would have. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would strongly suggest having a daily habit of connecting with nature, whatever you can do at this point. If you're stuck indoors, it might just be looking at nature photos online. If you can go outside and look at a plant closely, do that. So find where connecting to nature has huge power, and huge power to regenerate our souls and our brains. And so the tiny habit recipe might go like this. After I start the coffee maker, I will open up a search and look at nature photos, or maybe go to Pinterest and look at nature photos or something like that if you can't get outside. If you can go outside, maybe it's like, after I feed the dog, I'll walk around my yard and look carefully at all the plants. Okay, that's nature. Number 3, social. Find a way to connect with somebody every day. Let me give one of my habits. So I surf every morning here in Maui, and then after I'm done, the habit goes like this. After I pull onto the road and I'm driving home, I will call my parents. So every day, I'm not doing it today because I'm here with you all, I call my parents on the phone. And so find a moment, and not just texting, if you can, find a way to connect with a real human being every day, figure out where it fits. And again, I'll just use the same anchor. After I start the coffee maker, I will call my parents. Or if you can't feel like you can't call somebody, I will text one of my friends. So make a habit of saying it's going to be a great day. Make a habit of connecting with nature, and make a habit of connecting with somebody in real time in your life. I'm not talking Twitter. I'm not talking Facebook. I'm not talking even Instagram. In real time, connect with somebody else. And those would be the three things I would suggest in a difficult situation. And watch how your optimism changes, and watch how things will open up for you. And you'll be encouraged to make other changes in your life.
I think that's wonderful, and I'm sure that will help Frederick and many people who are going through very difficult times. And thank you so much for joining us and sticking with us through all the technical difficulties. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me.
Of course, yeah. And no, we have so many people in the stream asking for a longer session, and my producers have been dropping BJ's website into the comments. So if you visit that, he actually has a course on there that you could take. So even if you couldn't watch the whole session, or you didn't think the session was long enough, there's resources on his website. And of course, there is his book, Tiny Habits, small changes that change everything. And you'll see it. It has this little yellow tag, "This book will change your life." So be sure to check that out. And in fact, regarding the last question, there's a whole chapter in there about emotions and how they tie into habits. So be sure to check that out. And again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for spending some time with us and sticking with us through some technical difficulties. I hope you're staying safe, especially all of you in the South who are having cold snap right now. I think Jeffrey was joining us from Texas. He said he was thawing out. So, I hope you're all staying safe. Be sure to follow your local health guidelines, because it's obviously a difficult time all across the world right now. And you can only get hired. You can only be a good candidate if you're well enough and healthy enough to do so. So take care of yourself. We're not going to have a Get Hired next week, but don't worry. There's always wonderful content on the LinkedIn news page. And coming up today at 1:30, there's actually a conversation with Dan Yergin, who is a Pulitzer Prize winner. And, we're going to be talking about Texas facing so many challenges, rolling blackouts since this past weekend, the coldest temperatures it's had in a century. So that's at 1:30 Eastern time today. Energy expert, economic historian Daniel Yergin will be joining my colleague Nina Melendez on LinkedIn News Live to unpack the crisis. So be sure to tune into that. You'll be hearing a lot about sort of the oil industry, what happened, what caused this issue in Texas. And then I'll be back March 5th with another edition of Get Hired Live. And thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.